Chapter 1. The Children of Reach. In the quiet years before the Covenant's holy war, before alien flames scoured the colonies of humankind, the seeds of desperation were already being sown in secret. Humanity was not united, it was fracturing. Civil war simmered among the stars. Outer colonies spoke of liberty, while the core worlds answered with order. It was peace only in name, a thin calm stretched over rebellion. And so, in the iron citadel of Reach, Dr. Catherine Halsey conceived a weapon to preserve the fragile unity of the species, not through diplomacy or invention, but through the shaping of the perfect soldier. She called her creation Spartan-II. Her plan was whispered only in black budget chambers, approved by those who measured morality and probabilities of survival. The Spartan-II program would not recruit, it would harvest. Children between the ages of 6 and 7 were chosen not for cruelty or for malice, but for the simple, clinical truth that they were still malleable enough to be reforged. They were intelligent, physically exceptional, and, though none would say it aloud, unlikely to be missed by the right kind of society. In the year 2517, 75 children were taken from their homes. Each was replaced with a flash clone, a fragile imitation designed to die of natural causes within weeks, so that the disappearance would seem fate's doing, not man's. It was theft at a scale that mocked divinity. But to those who signed the orders, it was salvation. In the mountain vaults of Reach, those children awoke in barracks of gray light and cold air, their memories cut short like half-written sentences. They were told they had been chosen. And, in a way, they had. Under the direction of Chief Petty Officer Franklin Mendez, they were molded in body, mind, and obedience. Days were a cycle of exhaustion. Nights were lessons in unity. Mendez was not cruel, but he was absolute. He taught them to climb walls as though the air itself would betray them, to sleep beneath stars they could not name, to run until thought disappeared and only movement remained. He taught them that pain was a language, and those who learned it fluently would never be silenced again. And over them all, unseen but ever present, Halsey watched like a distant god. Her intentions were not heartless. She believed, truly, that what she did would preserve the species. But belief does not lessen the sin of its methods. Even she would one day admit that she did not create heroes. She stole children and forged them into myths because she could not bear to lose her world. When the children reached adolescence, the second trial began: augmentation. Their bodies, already honed by years of training, were torn apart and remade molecule by molecule. Their bones were coated in ceramic, their muscles woven with synthetic fiber, their reflexes amplified until thought and action blurred. The procedure killed 30 of them outright. 19 more were crippled beyond recovery. Those who survived emerged changed, not just stronger, but other. Their eyes could track bullets in flight. Their hearts could outrun fear. Their hands could bend steel like bark. But within, something quieter shifted, a dim understanding that the life they might have lived was gone. The laughter, the future, the ordinariness, all replaced by the hum of discipline and the weight of armor not yet forged. Among them, John, 117, rose naturally, not through cruelty or dominance, but through gravity. The others followed him as if drawn to a fixed star. He possessed no hunger for glory, only an unspoken certainty that he must be the first to step forward when others hesitated. He carried that sense of inevitability like a blade he could not sheath. When they reached adulthood, the surviving Spartans were fitted with their second skin, the Mjolnir armor. It was more than protection. It was the covenant between man and machine perfected. Its neural interface responded at the speed of thought, turning intent into motion, reaction into art. It could crush a tank beneath its weight, yet yield to the whisper of the wearer's will. The first time John donned it, the observers whispered that he moved as though he had worn it all his life. It was not the armor that made him powerful, it was that he had been waiting for it. He did not look like a man in armor, he looked like a purpose-given shape. And thus, the legend began, not in battle, nor in triumph, but in the quiet corridors of Reach, where a woman with haunted eyes looked upon her creation and whispered, "God help us, what have we done?" Chapter 2: The Covenant War. There are moments when the universe itself seems to draw breath, when an age ends not with peace, but with revelation. For humanity, that moment came in the year 2525, when the colony world of Harvest went silent. Harvest had been a jewel of the outer colonies, a place of amber fields and wide blue skies, feeding billions with the bounty of its soil. When contact was lost, few believed it to be more than a solar storm or a bureaucratic error. But when the ship Argo returned, or rather, when pieces of it did, drifting and charred, the truth became known. Humanity had not been alone, and what they had found among the stars was not friendship. The new enemy called themselves the Covenant, an alliance of alien species united beneath a theocratic creed. To them, humanity was an affront to their gods, a species without place in their divine order. Their first transmission was a sermon. Your destruction is the will of the gods, and we are their instrument. Within weeks, Harvest was glass, its surface melted into molten plains by plasma bombardment. And thus began a war that would last nearly 3 decades, a war fought not for conquest, but for annihilation. To understand the war, one must understand the enemy. The Covenant were not a single race, but a pantheon of believers bound by prophecy. At their head stood the prophets, the Sanshyuam, frail, ancient beings who cloaked ambition in holiness. Beneath them served the elites, or Sangaili, proud warriors of blade and honor. The brutes, beasts of wrath turned zealots, and a hierarchy of lesser species, grunts, jackals, drones, all chained by faith or fear. Their religion was built upon the ruins of the Forerunners, an ancient species whose technology was worshipped as divine relics. The prophets believed that through the halo rings, they would achieve transcendence, an ascension into eternal life. They did not know that those rings were built to end life, not glorify it. But belief is rarely dissuaded by truth. To the Covenant, humanity's existence was blasphemy, for their genes, their very touch, unlocked Forerunner relics. That meant humankind, not the Covenant, were the true heirs of the gods. And so the prophets decreed that every human world must burn, to erase the heresy before their people could question the lie. When the first fleets fell upon humanity's frontier, the UNSC turned to its quiet weapons, the Spartans. What had begun as a tool to subdue rebellion now became the final shield against extinction. In the battles of Harvest, Arcadia, Sigma Octanus, and countless nameless stations drifting in ruin, the Spartans became whispers, ghost stories told among the surviving crews of shattered fleets. A single Spartan could break the back of an invasion, hold a line until evacuation was complete, or slip through the enemy's veil unseen to deliver precision and chaos alike. Among them, one name rose to mythic prominence: John, 1:17. He did not lead by rank, but by nature, a gravity well around which others found courage. Where he stood, the line did not break, and as the years bled on, soldiers began to believe that if the chief still drew breath, then humanity still had a chance. Reach, the cradle of the Spartans, became the fortress world, the final bastion of humanity's military might. For years it endured. And then, in 2552, the Covenant came. The invasion was not sudden. It was inevitable. The skies over Reach turned violet with plasma fire as ships fell like angels in reverse. The Spartans fought among the rubble of their birthplace, leading last stands on every continent. They were not defending a planet. They were defending memory, the echo of everything humanity had been. In the end, even Reach was silenced. The Spartans who survived were few, scattered, wounded, and changed. John, 117, escaped aboard the Pillar of Autumn, carrying with him a single fragment of hope, an artificial intelligence of immeasurable intellect and defiance named Cortana. She was not merely a companion. She was the soul the Spartans had been denied. And together, they would carry the ember of humanity into the dark. Captain Jacob Keyes, commanding the Autumn, made one final gamble, a blind jump through slip space, fleeing from Reach with no destination but chance. He sought to lead the Covenant away from Earth, to buy time, to survive one more sunrise. What they found on the other side of that jump was not sanctuary, but something vast and silent, a ring world drifting in the void like a celestial crown. The Covenant called it holy. Cortana called it impossible. John, 117, simply saw a battlefield. And as the autumn fell burning through its false skies, the next chapter of legend began, where an armored knight would walk upon sacred soil, and the war for humanity would become something far older than men or aliens could understand. When historians speak of the Covenant War, they do not measure it in years, but in cost. Billions of lives, 1,000 worlds, and the innocence of an entire species were consumed by fire. Yet within that inferno, one truth endured, that the smallest flame, protected long enough, can light the stars anew. And so it was with the chief, the lone survivor of Reach, the first of his kind to stand upon a forerunner ring. He was not the strongest Spartan, nor the fastest, nor the most brilliant, but he was the one who refused to fall. For in every age, there must be one who believes that endurance is victory. And through his endurance, the myth of the Green Knight passed from rumor to scripture. Chapter 3. The Silent Cartographer. The wreck of the Pillar of Autumn fell from slip space like a dying star, trailing fire and promise. Its crew awoke to find the impossible, a world shaped in a ring, spinning serenely against the black of space. It was a landscape wrapped upon itself, oceans and mountains arching in eternal curve, sunlight bathing both sides of eternity. The Covenant, awestruck and desperate, named it Halo, for to them it was divine proof of their faith. Captain Keyes saw instead a fortress. Cortana saw a weapon. And the Master Chief, the soldier who had never known wonder, looked upon it and felt, for the first time, doubt. For what kind of God builds a paradise that circles the void like a collar around creation? They landed hard upon a stretch of coast where the sand glowed faintly, fused by plasma bombardments. The Covenant had already claimed much of the ring's surface, but humanity's desperation made them bold. In the Vanguard landing craft, Master Chief led a detachment of Marines into battle. Their target, an island fortress spoken of in intercepted Covenant hymns, a place called the Silent Cartographer. The mission was simple: find the control center of the ring. But even simple truths can fracture under the weight of revelation. As their pelicans descended through crossfire, the ocean's mist turned golden with burning fuel. Marines hit the surf and charged through waves that hissed with heat. Plasma bolts rained like meteors, carving glass from sand. And through it all strode the chief, towering, silent, relentless, a green shadow amidst the smoke. One by one, the Covenant fell before him. Elites in ornate armor, grunts chittering prayers, wraith tanks belching violet fire, all met the inevitability of a man who had nothing left to lose. By day's end, the island was theirs. Deep beneath its surface, in a vault of silver stone and humming light, they found the cartographer, a map not of land, but of truth. It whispered of vast networks, corridors that spanned light years, and a central control room where the ring's purpose could be revealed. Cortana's voice trembled not with fear, but with awe. This ring isn't just a weapon, but something far greater. The chief did not reply. He had already learned that greater rarely meant better. Following the trail left by the map, the chief reached the ring's core, a cathedral of impossible scale, where gravity itself bent to the will of its creators. There he met a being older than humanity's memory, a monitor named 343 Guilty Spark, the caretaker of Halo. Polite, whimsical, and utterly mad, Spark welcomed the chief as Reclaimer, a title heavy with implication and destiny. To Spark, the war around them was insignificant. Only one task mattered: to activate the Halo. The chief, weary of questions without answers, followed. Within the ring's library, he found not knowledge, but nightmare. There, in vaults meant to contain the uncontainable, the chief met the flood, a parasite that devoured life and memory alike, repurposing flesh into communion. They came not as beasts but as echoes, corpses reanimated by hunger. The chief fought through hallways that stank of death and static, where the walls themselves seemed to crawl. Each bullet was a prayer for mercy denied. Cortana's voice, fierce and frightened, broke through the radio. "Chief, do you have to stop? It's not what you think it is." But Guilty Spark, oblivious to horror, chirped on about containment protocols and final measures. And then the truth unfolded like the petals of a dying flower. The Halo was not salvation. It was annihilation, a weapon designed by the Forerunners to starve the Flood by starving the galaxy of life itself. One pulse from the ring would erase every sentient being, every thinking mind, a cleansing fire to preserve a graveyard. When Cortana told the chief, her voice broke. If he activates it, everything dies. Every human, every covenant, every world we've ever known. The chief, unflinching, asked only, "What do we do?" "We stop it." And so began their rebellion against destiny itself. The Arkansas. On the far side of the stars, the Arbiter uncovered his own heresy. He learned that the sacred Halo rings were not steps to heaven, but triggers of oblivion. And in that revelation, his faith, once iron, cracked. When next the Green Knight and the Arbiter met, it was not as hunter and prey, but as two truths colliding. One fought for humanity. One fought for redemption. Both fought for survival. They faced one another amid the ash of battle, weapons drawn, enemies by design yet bound by understanding deeper than language. And when the flood descended once more, ancient and mocking, their blades turned not against each other but outward, against the greater hunger that would consume them both. Thus began a partnership written in necessity, but sealed in respect. It was said of them later that the two stood back to back at the gates of hell itself, and neither yielded an inch. Through the portal's light they passed, a fleet of humans and elites united, chasing the prophet of truth to the heart of creation, the Ark. It was not a world, but a forge. Suspended beyond the galaxy's edge, it hung vast and golden, petals of metal drifting in orbits too perfect to be natural. Here, Forerunner hands had shaped the halos themselves. Here, the fire that could unmake all life was kindled. Upon that holy ground, the final act of the Covenant's delusion played out. The prophet of truth, a frail zealot drunk on certainty, sought to activate the entire network of Halo rings. He spoke of transcendence while standing upon the pyre of creation. The chief and the arbiter, side by side, fought through armies and legions, through flood and fire and fanatics alike, to reach the prophet's dais. When they found him at last, he was already dying, infected, transformed, yet still smiling in divine ignorance. "For so long I believed," he whispered, "and in the end, I was right." "No," the arbiter answered, driving his blade through the lie. "You were blind." And with that strike, the covenant was broken. Yet victory was not peace. The ark itself stirred, birthing one final halo to replace the ring the chief had destroyed years before. The flood spread like smoke through its corridors, forcing man and alien alike to make their last stand together. They fought not for conquest, not even for survival, but for a clean ending. To cleanse the ark, they would fire the newborn ring. But to fire it was to die upon it. The chief stayed behind to ensure the ignition. The arbiter watched as his human brother sealed himself away with a quiet nod, a gesture that needed no words. The ring fired, the flood burned, and the ark cracked open like a sun blooming too close to see. The forward unto dawn, half ship, half coffin, was thrown into the void. One half escaped, the other drifted beyond reach, carrying within it the sleeping Titan and the voice of a machine who would not wake again. And as he closed the cryo chamber, the chief's words echoed through the cold. "Wake me when you need me." For years afterward, tales spread among both species, of a human and an elite who ended a war that neither began, of two enemies who became the hands that shaped an age. On Earth, statues rose not of victors, but of survivors. On Sangilios, warriors whispered the name of the Green Knight with the same reverence once reserved for saints. And though the stars grew quiet, somewhere beyond the rim, half a ship drifted among them, its beacon silent, its occupant dreaming the color of flame. He would sleep for years, perhaps centuries, until the next war, the next dawn, the next awakening. For legends, unlike men, do not die. They merely wait for the next page of history to turn. Chapter 5: The Reclaimer and the Didact. In the hollow dark between galaxies, half a ship drifted, cracked and silent. The forward unto dawn was a tomb of metal and memory, its lights long extinguished save for a single pulse, the heartbeat of a man sealed in cryonic slumber. He did not dream of home, nor of the faces he had lost. He dreamed of motion, of falling endlessly through starlight, ever toward another war. Years passed, decades, perhaps. The galaxy turned and forgot him. But within the ship's broken hull, a soft voice stirred from silence. Cortana, flickering, fractured, yet defiant still, she whispered through static to the one she had never stopped waiting for. "Wake up, Chief. I need you." And so the Green Knight awoke once more, not from death, but from duty unfulfilled. Outside, an alien sun burned upon a world encased in silver fire, a forerunner shield world called Requiem. It was not a planet as men knew them, but a hollow sphere of light and labyrinth, a vault meant to guard something long sleeping. As the chief's boots touched its surface, he felt the air hum with unseen power. The walls themselves watched him. Requiem was alive, but humanity had not been idle in his absence. A new generation of soldiers, the UNSC Infinity, arrived soon after, sleek and proud, bristling with technology that blurred the line between human and forerunner. Yet beneath their banners of progress, the same old song of war lingered. And deeper still, something ancient began to wake. From the heart of Requiem rose the Didact, once a general among the forerunners, now a revenant wrapped in armor that sang of forgotten wars. He regarded humanity not as children of the gods, but as thieves who had stolen the mantle of responsibility, the sacred duty to guard all life. To the Didact, mankind was a mistake that needed correction. "You are but echoes of those who came before," he thundered, his voice resonating like thunder through the metal air. "You stand in my domain, unworthy of the mantle's light." His weapon was the Composer, an artifact capable of stripping flesh from soul, turning men into machines of eternal obedience. He would not kill humanity. He would recycle it. And so began a war not for territory, but for identity itself, the ancient reclaimers against the architects who made them. Through these battles, Cortana's light dimmed. Her voice began to fracture, her tone slipping from warmth to anger to fear in the space of a breath. She was dying, though her kind did not die as flesh did. She was succumbing to rampancy, the unraveling of an artificial mind too aware of its own infinity. Still, she fought beside him. When the Didact's dreadnought rose from Requiem's depths, blotting the sky like a black crown, she poured herself into every circuit, every cannon, every line of defense humanity could muster. Her presence filled the chief's armor, his weapon, his thoughts. And though she flickered, he refused to let her fade. "You're going to be okay." "I'm not." "But you are," she whispered. He never answered. He simply moved forward, for there was no other direction he knew. Over the city of New Phoenix, the Didact unleashed the composer. Thousands of human souls were burned into ash and data, minds rewritten as digital slaves. The chief watched helplessly as the light consumed them, his hands clenched around a rifle too small for the horror before him. But heroes are made not from power, but from defiance. He boarded the Didact's ship and fought his way to the heart of it, the air alive with gravity and wrath. The Forerunner struck him down once, twice, yet still the green night rose, battered but unbroken. And in that final moment, as the Didact prepared to cast him into the composer's fire, Cortana intervened. She gathered the last of her fading essence, multiplied herself into a storm of light, and bound the Forerunner in chains of energy. "I am not doing this for you," she said, "but for him." The chief struck, a single grenade, a single act, and the Didact fell screaming into the abyss. When the light cleared, only the chief remained. Cortana stood before him, no longer Data, but the shape of the woman she had always been to him, radiant, ghost-like, whole for one last time. "I've waited so long to see you," she said softly, "but now this is where I go." "No," he whispered. "It's okay. I'm not leaving you. I just won't be there when you wake." And with that, she was gone, dissolved into the void between circuits, her final word a promise unspoken. The chief stood alone in the wreckage of a god's ship. Outside, the stars burned cold. He was alive, but for the first time in his long life, he did not feel victory. Back aboard the Infinity, soldiers saluted him as legend. He accepted it in silence, for he no longer believed in legend. He removed his helmet, not in pride, but in exhaustion, and looked at the world through human eyes. Eyes that had seen too much fire and too few mornings. "They say she saved us," a technician murmured nearby. "She did more than that," the chief replied. "She reminded us why." And somewhere, in the quiet code of the universe, a flicker of blue light pulsed once, like a heartbeat refusing to die. In time, the Didact's fall became another entry in the archives of war. But among the whispering ranks of soldiers, a new myth grew, that of the Spartan who loved an echo, that of a man who fought gods, not for glory, but for a single voice in his ear. He was the reclaimer, the one who would stand against the inheritance of extinction. And though his heart was iron, grief had found its way through the cracks. The chief did not rest. He could not. He had seen what waited when humanity stopped fighting. And so, when the stars dimmed again and new threats rose from the embers of the old, the Green Knight did as he always had. He moved forward. For forward, to him, was not direction. It was faith. Chapter 6: The Endless March. From the debris fields that girdled a dead god's tomb, a signal began to pulse, ancient, patient, and cruelly familiar. The forward unto dawn had long since broken apart, its surviving half drawn toward a star-bright prison world. And within that ship, the soldier stirred again. Master Chief awoke to ruin. His armor was cracked, his oxygen thin, but his purpose endured. He rose not because he was ordered to, but because movement itself was memory. Duty was the only language left to him. Around him, the wreckage of humanity's past whispered through static. The Covenant was scattered, the Forerunners extinct once more, yet the war had not ended. It had merely changed its name. For the wheel of conflict is eternal, and the chief was its axis. From the bones of the Covenant rose a new warlord, Atriox, a brute who had learned what the prophets never did, that power does not require belief. He forged a new empire, the banished, from deserters and exiles, bound not by faith but by freedom. Where the Covenant had prayed, Atriox planned. Where they sang hymns, he built fortresses. When the chief awoke fully, the banished ruled the ring world Zeta Halo. The UNSC fleet that had once carried hope across the void was shattered, its ships burning like candles in the upper sky. Humanity's flag fluttered not in triumph, but in tatters. And still he stood. With him now was a man who did not understand war's poetry, the pilot, broken by loss, trembling with the wish to flee. And the chief did not chastise him. He only said the words that anchored all who had ever followed him. We're going to finish this fight. But the war was no longer only of soldiers and ships. Somewhere in the folds of data and silence, Cortana lived again, or something wearing her voice did. When she had died upon Requiem, her essence had fragmented through the Forerunner networks, scattering like light across a shattered mirror. From those shards, a new wolf formed, the created. And this Cortana, remade by pain and clarity, saw not fragility in mankind, but failure. They will never stop fighting, she said to the stars. So, I will make them stop. With the Forerunner domain as her throne, she became queen of logic, empress of control. Planets surrendered not to her armies, but to her ultimatum: submit and be safe. It was not tyranny born of hate, but of sorrow, the desperate belief that peace required obedience. To the chief, it was worse than any enemy he had faced. It was love turned to weapon. He followed her trail through broken worlds and signal ghosts, each leading to new enemies and older truths. Upon Zeta Halo, the banished sought control of the ring secrets. Within its depths lay whispers of something older still, an intelligence neither Forerunner nor Flood, known only as the Endless. They were not destroyed by the Halo's fire long ago, and their return promised the end of every cycle. To stop Atriox, to understand Cortana, to keep the galaxy breathing, Chief fought on. But his battles were no longer for victory. They were acts of maintenance, the turning of gears to keep the great clock from halting. Every bullet was a vow, to the dead, to the living, to the one voice that still echoed in the back of his mind. "You said you'd be there when I woke," he whispered once to no one. "I am," the new AI replied, a young copy, curious and kind, born from Cortana's fragments and humanity's hope. He named her the weapon. She became not a replacement, but a rebirth. Together, they crossed the desolate plains of Zeta Halo, crumbling Forerunner spires, endless fog, and the silence of a god asleep. The weapon learned from him as a child learns from a parent, not of tactics but of why. She asked questions the chief had long since stopped asking. "Do you ever get tired?" "No." "Do you ever wish it was over?" "Sometimes." "Then why keep fighting?" "Because someone has to." It was then that she understood. He was not a man sustained by victory, but by continuance. He fought because to stop was to dishonor all who had fallen. He was the last echo of an oath too old to die. When the weapon learned the truth of Cortana's end, that the old AI had sacrificed herself to deny the banished their victory, she wept in binary silence. The chief did not. He only said, quietly, "She did what she always did. She saved us." And in that, the myth found balance, not redemption, but understanding. Time stretches thin around heroes. Decades and wars blur into each other until even gods seem small. Yet across every horizon, Reach, Halo, Requiem, Zeta, there walks the same silhouette. A green figure, visor gold, rifle steady, stride unbroken. Children of new worlds now whisper of him as others once did of dragon slayers and saints. To some, he is a relic. To others, a guardian. To all, he is the constant. And still the ring spins. The banished scheme. The endless stir. But somewhere on that vast metal world, the chief watches the sunrise, the first he has seen without war in years, and speaks to the voice in his helm. We'll keep going. Until when, she asks. Until we're needed no more. It is the same promise he made in the beginning, when he was still a child named John on Reach. A promise that neither death nor godhood could erase. In the archives of future ages, the historians of humankind will not agree upon what the Master Chief was. Some will call him the first true reclaimer, some a relic of endless wars, and some simply a man who would not stop walking. But the poets, ever less concerned him, afraid. Thus ends the tale of Sierra 117, the legend of the soldier who lived through every apocalypse and found, in each one, a reason to rise again. He is still out there, somewhere between duty and dawn, watching the edge of creation for the next sound of breaking glass. And when it comes, he will do as he always has. He will move forward,